Okay, wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a treat tonight. As many of you may know, Jake Huckey has changed our lives. Jake is the first person who offered whiskey to us during for one of our tastings. Before Jake, we were just doing interviews and telling people what they should buy ahead of time. And then Jake essentially changed my life and Eric's life to turn this into like a part-time job because we're so freaking busy now acquiring and pouring whiskeys. And thank God we get help from a number of people on here. But Jake, you really have changed the nature of this group because when you asked us what's everybody going to be drinking, and then you said, well, I've got some samples, and then Eric and I were like, hey, what do you know? That changed everything. And you're also the first person to come back a second time. Okay, because you had a whole bunch of stuff that you wanted us to taste. One thing I was thrilled about when I saw this lineup is that only one of the expressions tonight is the same as the first time, the Nova, which is your flagship. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to all pay attention now to Jake Huckey, our very dear friend from Starward. He's going to walk us through 5 different drams from Starward. And we are starting, I believe, Jake, with the Nova, right?
Yeah, but I'm just really I feel like I spoiled you too much maybe a little bit here, and now I'm kind of regretting all of it. So I'm just glad you bought a single barrel or a half single barrel. So I guess it all worked out for the spoiling of everybody, but I do appreciate it. I appreciate the invite back. You guys were I still talk about your presentation, your way of doing these virtual tastings, how it's different compared to everybody else's, where I just sit and talk for an hour and I'm kind of looking at myself, hoping it's someone interjects a little bit, versus you guys coming with questions and having a little bit of a game plan. Paul, do not do that to me ever again. Don't ever thumbs down me, especially in that hat. You look so commandeering. But I appreciate it. Thanks for welcoming me back. I did want to share some more things with you. Nova, we decided to repeat that in this kit because it's the base, it's the flagship, as you mentioned, Gil. Where just wanted to figure out, I kind of put people's palate to where we begin as a distillery. So that's why it's there. But we have a whole new lineup of LTOs where only one of them is actually released in the United States, which is the barrel pick. The order we'll be going in is Nova, Fortis, Tawny, the barrel pick from Total Wine down in Texas, and then we're finishing up with a bottled cocktail. I say bottled cocktail because some people have an old fashioned, which looks like this, our bottled old fashioned, and then some people have our red Manhattan, which I actually don't have any more of left. So I spoiled it all on you guys.
All right, let me stop you for a second,
Yeah,
Jake. I want to make sure that I repeat this for everybody here. We're going. Here's the order: Nova, Fortis, Tawny, single cask, and then whatever mixed drink you were given, either the old fashioned or the Manhattan. Okay.
yep.
And somebody's asking the question: what is the LTO? Was that a limited term offering or something, or
Yeah,
what's it?
limited time offering.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So,
right. So that's a
sorry.
single. Okay. No, no, that's fine. And also, I want to make sure that you understand here, Jake, that our group has grown and changed since you were back with us. I think it was December. So there are a lot of people here who actually were not on that initial tasting.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
So it would be a good idea for you to start off when we're going into the Nova right now to give us a little bit of a background. We're going to start off drinking the Nova. So everybody put a little bit of a dram in there. Jake, tell us a little bit about the grain that's in here and how this is aged.
For sure. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that there are new people on here. I was wondering how exploratory we get with this, so it's cool to see there's new people and Paul on this call. But yeah, so to begin with, as our brand, Starward, we are a single malt distillery based out of Melbourne, Australia. We started selling in the US just a little over 2.5 years ago, which is where my story with the distillery begins, where as we were talking about whiskeys of the world at Binny's, that's actually where I met our founder and owner, Dave Vitale. After about an hour conversation, he offered me a job to be his first hire here in the United States, and I gladly accepted after some tough negotiations, of course, and took that job on, that responsibility of really traveling the United States and spreading the good word, which is Starward whiskey. And Nova, what you're drinking right now, and hold on to a little bit of that because we're going to pull a lot of flavors out of that one. It is really the core essence of our distillery as we go through this lineup. Um, is what we focus on making on a daily basis. Our owner, Dave, he wanted to create a single malt distillery based out of Australia, representing Australia inside of a bottle. So he started working with local farmers that are within a day's drive away from our distillery to develop the grains that we're going to use, which is malted barley inside of Nova, 100% malted barley. So it is a true single malt. We started developing our yeast strain based off of ingredients in Australia and local ingredients. But the main claim to fame, that if you can call it that we have with our distillery, is that we use local red wine barrels to barrel age our whiskey inside of fully. It's a complete maturation inside of those wine casks for about 3 to 4 years, where we take wine casks.
So it's not a finishing. It's like you're not doing it in one barrel and finishing it in something else.
No, it's 100% maturation inside of these wine casks for 3 to 5 years, using a variety of Shiraz, Pinot, and Cab barrels mostly from wineries that are in Barossa and Yarra Valleys. Those are two valleys that are very close to Melbourne. Yarra Valley is only about an hour and a half away, where Barossa Valley is a little bit further, but you have the likes of Penfolds and Marley Duker there that are great wineries that we work with to get cast on a daily basis from them. We have about 35 vineyards that we consistently contract with to get barrels from them, and we do a process called wet filling, where within 2 days we get barrels from the vineyard and put whiskey inside of them. So we don't mind having a little bit of wine still on the inside. All we really do traditionally to most of our casks is steam coat them a little bit to hydrate them, bring them back to life, but we aren't recharring or doing like a STR method of our casts on a daily basis. Only about 20 to 25% of our barrels are recharred or even toasted at that point.
Let me stop you for a second. STR.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us. I mean, a lot of people here don't know what that means. Want to make sure that they get that from you.
Get into it for sure. Yeah. So shaved, toasted, recharred, which is a process that a lot of companies use to with their barrels, especially when it's coming from a winery and they're putting in the whiskey in there as a finish versus putting it into a full maturation. What we really wanted to do is have that really nice congruency between the wine and the whiskey to really represent what Australia is known for in the alcohol industry inside of our whiskey, which is big, juicy, fruity red wines. And that's why we chose to use red wine barrels at the end of the day versus using ex-bourbon casks, which, you know, we have the best bourbon, we have the best X cast in the world over here in America as we create the delicious whiskey for the world called bourbon, which is an American mainstay, obviously. I'm a bourbon drinker at heart, but now I sell Australian whiskey. So I'm an Australian drinker at heart too, whiskey drinker at heart. But the main focus of the company was, let's make an Australian whiskey, not recreate the wheel of Scotch, Irish, or Japanese whiskey. Let's honor those traditions by doing double pot still distillation for all of our malted barley, by using barrels that are local to us, but using it in a different way. And that difference was the red wine barrels. So instead of grabbing casks from all across the world and grabbing ex-bourbon casks and really recreating the wheel of Scotch and calling it Australian whiskey, what we wanted to do was create a true Australian product. And that's why we have Nova, meaning new, as one of our very first whiskeys and as our as our flagship whiskey.
And it's 100%. This is 100% malted barley, correct?
Yeah, 100% malted barley. All the barley, like I said, is local. It's the most readable grain in Australia. Was another focus of our owner. He worked at a distillery called Lark over in Tasmania. That's where he trained, honed his skills as a distiller, and wanted to represent all the local barley he could. By using it as malted, putting in the wine barrels for 3 to 4 years, using about 23 red wine casks in a batch of whiskey, one batch of our single malt whiskey. So in about like 13, 14, 15 of those casks are going to be Shiraz casks, ex-Shiraz casks, then some ex-Pinot and ex-Cabs to round it out. But we really wanted to focus on Shiraz casks with this one because Shiraz is the main wine export out of Australia.
And do you try to have the Nova be the same from year to year? Is it always are you looking for a consistency there?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question, Gil. Like, what we're really trying to do is create consistency through diversity of casks. Our Dave was a brewer by trade, and then he kind of learned from Bill Lark over at Lark to be a distiller. But that was about 2 years of apprenticeship. And then when he started his own distillery, he started hiring brewers for the front of our distillery to, be that first process. When you're making whiskey, what you're essentially doing is making beer. So all of our distillers are brewers by trade, but then everybody on our back end of our process are wine winemakers by trade. So all the people that do our blending, some part of our distilling team are winemakers. And what he wanted to do is find that balance between wine and whiskey with not just what he was producing off the still and in the distillery, but with the people that he hired. So we're always monitoring our whiskey from our senses by tasting it, nosing it. We have to barrel age it for at least 2 years to be considered whiskey in Australia, but we aren't afraid to use 2-year-old whiskey in a batch of Nova or a batch of Twofold or any other whiskey that we're producing, as long as we think it's ready and matured perfectly, because the fluctuation swings in temperature are so great in Australia, specifically in Melbourne, where we're going from like 110 to 60 degrees in one summer's day, and always consistently having 35 to 40 degree temperature swings throughout the entire year on a daily basis.
Right. And when we talked about it last
Yeah.
time, that your angel share, because of how hot it gets,
Mhm.
that you're losing what, like 12% per year or something like that, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
We can our smaller casts. So like our 30-gallon cast, our exploratory cast, definitely. And then on average with our 53-gallon cast, most of our barrels are 53 gallons. We're losing between 6 and 7% a year.
Oh, that's all. Okay, I thought it was more than that. And then, so is this mostly Shiraz, or is it all Shiraz?
Mostly Shiraz.
Okay,
About
mostly
13,
Shiraz.
13, 14, 15 barrels are going to be Shiraz casts out of that 23 to 24, 25 that are in one batch of whiskey that we blend together.
Got it. Yeah, I'm gonna be since we're we've done this with you before. I'm gonna be paying a little bit more attention to the questions that show up in the chat. I'm gonna throw them at you as they come through. Somebody also has Josh is asking a question here about the yeast that you're using. Is it primarily something off the shelf, or is it something experimental that you guys have developed?
Yeah, it's I can't speak about it too much. It's the one thing we kind of hide or don't share with the public to what we do, but we do use a brewer's yeast and a distiller's yeast for that. Something we developed. The distiller's yeast is more something we developed. Our now head distiller Sam, who was our very first hire at Starward, him and Dave developed it together with that. So, but yeah, it is a local yeast. Nothing too crazy like a open fermentation or anything like that, making a wild fermentation with our whiskey and adding yeast in at all different times. But yeah, it is definitely localized to Melbourne.
Okay. All right. So you gave us 5 samples here. So I want us to make sure that we actually get through these, because I want to see things. One quick question before we go on. So I know that Nova is available in the United States. Okay. Are all of these available in the US right now, or
No.
not? No. Okay. All right.
So the only other one that is available technically is the Total Wine Barrel Pick. If you really want a bottle of that, let me know. I will have to organize that for you.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it's received. We'll see when we get to that. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. So Fortis. What is Fortis?
Yeah. Great. This was actually supposed to be released in the United States. It was supposed to launch in the United States beginning of the end of last year, but it was the exact same time that our single barrels were starting to be released. Our first round of single barrels were starting to release across the United States. Nova, which sits at 82 proof. Fortis is actually a single malt. It is the exact same juice as Nova coming off the still. The difference between the two is that it's only barrel aged in ex-American oak casks. So our distillery has about 13,000 red wine casks that are fully maturing whiskey. Between that 13,000, we have a pretty even split of American and French oak, even though they come from a diversity of wine barrels. Those wine barrels are still American and French oak, a little Hungarian oak, but a very small percentage of that. But with Fortis, we wanted to make it completely an American oak spirit and also bottled at 100 proof. So it's a single malt, barrel aged in Shiraz, ex-Shiraz casks, but they're only from American oak. And then same thing, barrel aged for about 3 to 4 years. We don't really go over that 5-year mark with anything that's coming off our shelf, just because we have that fluctuation in temperature where we're losing a lot in a percentage in a year, and that's 6, 7, 8%. But we also don't want to create vinegar. Essentially, at the end of the day, when we have wine still in the barrels and it's a hot temperature where the pores are opening and contracting at such a high rate of speed on a daily basis, that we want to create good whiskey and not good vinegar.
It's funny. We spoke with Jared Himstedt last week from Balcones, and he told us that there was one barrel that they had that started with should have been like a 300, the way the barrels are, it's a 300 bottle barrel. And it ended up with all of the, angel share in Texas after I think like 4 or 5 years, ended up being 71 bottles.
I believe
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I mean it's like less than a quarter. I mean it's incredible. And he said it actually turned out to be good, but that's rare that something like that is going to happen, and you're going to end up with a good whiskey after that level of maturation and evaporation there.
Absolutely. And like that's the thing we're trying to also stay away from is drawing in those heavy oak influences and taking over the preciousness of the wine interacting with the whiskey. So we don't want to go over that year at too much of that yearly mark of 4 years. And I always say that Texas drinkers get our whiskey really well because of that. They know the heat and how cantankerous it can be with their whiskey at the end of the day. And Jared, Balcones is kind of like it's near and dear to my heart. It was the very first craft whiskey I ever had in my entire life. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
Okay.
baby blue was
All right.
right up there.
So we're getting a few quick questions here, so I want to make sure. So both Nova and Fortis are about 3 to 4 years old. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And the main difference, the two main differences between the two is that Nova is, you said, what, like 46%? Is it, or 43%?
41.
So Nova's 41% and Fortis is 50% alcohol.
100%.
Okay. Yep. And the other difference is that although they're both in wine casks, the wine casks are different. For Fortis, it's all American oak Shiraz casks for the most part, right?
Yep.
Okay. And the Nova is Australian oak, right?
Okay. It's a split between American and French oak. Yeah.
American and French. Okay. So then one person's noticing here that it seems like Fortis has different legs on it. Okay. Than the Nova. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think with Nova, there's this like strawberry flavor to it, these orchard fruit flavors that are very consistent throughout tasting it through batch to batch. It a little bit more spicier, draws upon the barrel tannins in a different way that Fortis will, where I think the wine is very present, like in a Pinot kind of flavor, obviously a Shiraz too. Some people get a little bit of a sherry note to it, but the American oak reminds me more of what you would find like in a Speyside Scotch, or some like dark chocolate flavors to it, some oranginess to it. They both have a peppery taste, but I find like you get more of like almost like a white peppery towards Nova and more of a black pepper with Fortis to it. This is only like the second time I've ever drank Fortis. This is how rare it's been in the United States. Like I just have a couple bottles of it, and I shared literally all of it, but that much with you guys. So yeah, not a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So like this is literally the second time I've drank it.
Yeah.
So picking up on it rather quickly, I do find it be they both have a very long finish to them, and being Nova being at 41% and this being at 50% isn't super high, but if someone gave me Fortis and said like this is a bourbon, I could believe them on it. It wouldn't be too crazy. Maybe it has like a sherry cask finish or some sort of wine finish to it, but the barrel with Nova, I find the wine presence all too familiar, and also presence in there as well.
Yeah. So we're getting this group, and we are getting some geek questions. I have to admit, I have, and then some of the geek questions we're getting, the usual suspects. And so Paul asked an interesting question here about the fermentation. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds on this, but out of respect for Paul and his support of this group, he actually is asking here, how long and hot is the fermentation? Do they pitch both yeasts together at the same time, or do they have a different pitch schedule? I know you could probably talk about an hour on the answer to this question, and that still wouldn't satisfy Paul. But if you could maybe give us the Reader's Digest answer, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So we do about a 3-day fermentation on it. Nothing too crazy. We do pitch the yeast at a different point. I'm not allowed to say which one goes into where, or what point of we do the pitching of those different yeasts inside of there, but it is I'm sure you'd be Paul, he'd probably guess to where they are at that point. But when it comes to the fermentation process, it is really where we're trying to create these fruity kind of like embery taste to our juice at the end of the day, our distiller's beer. If you would actually, I need to try that next time next time, whenever we do a tasting together again. I need to give you guys a little. I have some distiller's beer like off the still from here, a small amount, but I do have some new make as well, which would really put you kind of at the very beginning stages of our whiskey. We get like this tangerine banana taste to it. What we're really trying to do at the end of the day is really trying to create like a Hefeweizen, essentially, with our distiller's beer. And it's interesting because, like I said, all of our distillers are brewers by trade. So like they've dry hopped our beer, our distiller's beer, messing around with projects at the distillery because we have a 300 person seated bar at our distillery where we can sell weird random things, and the laws are a little bit more loose in Australia when it comes to alcohol. When it comes to alcohol, not other things, but when it comes to alcohol sales versus here in the U.S. Yeah, so it's kind of a nice little experimentation process that we can always play around with at our stills.
Well, we're getting good comments. People are enjoying this stuff very much. It reminds them of some of this stuff. Reminds them of Glenmorangie. Some other Highlands. Old Pulteney, which are great to be compared to. One of our other geeks here, and again, it's not a negative term. It is a term of affection. One of our other geeks here is William Myers, of course, and Mr. Myers has two specific questions I really like here. One, can you tell us a little bit about the shape of your stills?
Yeah, definitely. So we do a double pot still distillation for all of our malted barley, all of our single malts. We do have a column still for our single grain whiskey, which is wheat, which we actually contract out to a wheat manufacturer up the street from our distillery, about a mile away, where we use their facilities to actually go make it there with them versus them making it for us. But yeah, our double pot still distillation, we just upgraded our distillery at the end of the fall of last year. Yeah. Time is, irrelevant these days, but in 2020 we upgraded our stills. So we actually changed it into our 3,000 liter and a 5,000 liter still. So our 5,000 liter still is our wash still, and it's like 3,200 liters for our spirit still, where we are doing a traditional pot still distillation. We do have a jacket around top of the pots, kind of like right where the column the neck kind of starts to form, but nothing too crazy with the angles or anything like that.
Did you make bigger stills, or have you added stills as your production's gone up?
We added bigger ones. So we always had double pot still distillation, but our 3,100 liter still, I think it's 3,100 liters, 32 or 31. That was our wash still, but now it's our spirit still, and then we upgraded to a 5,000 liter wash still recently. But we do try to play around with jackets around the necks of our stills, just because of how much water and evaporation we're getting on a daily basis because of the heat fluctuations in there. Our temperature in our distillery can reach like 120 on a summer's day. Yeah. So we don't want to try to like really create super light whiskey, if you will, at the end of the day. Where I've worked for other distilleries that they are, during the process, it's such a high heat inside of the still that you're burning so much off, and then those tannins and those other components like at the back end.
Well, I got to stop you here for a second, because talking about full flavored and mouthfeel and oily and delicious, a number of us have moved on to the tawny. Okay, dude.
Yeah.
Is this? Are you telling me this is not available here in the United States?
So I've had a love affair with tawny ever since I started with the distillery. This was
just answer the question.
Is
this
not
available
right
in the US
now.
or not?
I have this much left in the United States. Well, this much left in Chicago, I should say. We have a few more bottles lying around somewhere, but Tawny was the first whiskey I had, not from our core group that we sell here in the US, but I had it at cask strength. I think this is at 48. Is that right? Yeah, 48%. I had it at 55%, which is usually cask strength for us.
Must have been incredible.
Yeah, it was one of those. It was at the distillery in Australia, which is always nice to do. I'd only been working for the company for about 2 months, but it really solidified any sort of apprehension I had about working for an Australian distillery, just because you can't see it, you can't be. It's not like I can go down the street or can't drive to Kentucky and go to this distillery. It's like I have to travel across the world to get there. And I had tasted what we were selling in the U.S. and really loved it. And then I tasted Tawny at Cask Strength, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible.
So tell us about the aging. Okay, so is this the same juice, just aged differently?
Yeah. So it's the same distillation technique, same fermentation, same mashing as Nova, but and as Fortis and as Solera, which you've had in the past, and it's available here in the U.S.
And Solera is amazing. For those of you who are new, who are not here in our first tasting, Solera is a wonderful expression. Love your Solera stuff. That was great. A lot of people bought bottles of that after our last tasting. But tell us how this is aged. What is this aged in?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the process.
Yeah, so we actually just on Solera for one, we just had 30 cases drop in Chicago today.
Oh,
so it's available again.
Whoa.
Yeah, we only get about 100 cases in the U.S. total a year. But yeah, for Tawny, it is so the same distillation techniques, the same mashing, double apostle distillation, but instead of putting it into extra Shiraz, Pinot, and Cab barrels, we put it into Tawny casks, so export barrels, if you will. Australian Tawny, yeah. So their variation of Tawny, but it really takes us back to one of the very kind of the roots of our distillery, which is with McWilliams and Yolumba, which are the two vineyards we started buying barrels from initially. We started buying their Apera casks, their fortified wine casks from them. It's one of the few vineyards that actually makes Tawny. It's kind of growing there again as port's grown in popularity out of Portugal in recent years. But we put these in there for almost 4 to 5 years. It's always
okay.
Yeah.
So again, it's not finished. It's actually aged in it. It's not finished. It's aged in it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's put in there a variety of size of casks. Like it's 30, 53, 59 gallon barrels, hogshead barrels as well. So a variety of casks that we barrel aged them inside of for at least 4 years. I know some of them go pretty close to 5 years as well, just because we want to draw so much flavor and complexity for them. And it's only a yearly release that we release at our distillery. So I think it's 4,000 bottles on this one.
Okay. So let me stop you for a second for a few quick questions. First question is the Solera, which we don't have here. Is Solera essentially the Nova just aged in different wine casks and a slightly higher proof, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it's that's part of it. It's about 3/4 of it. So it is the same juice coming off the still. We barrel age it in a Apera cask, which is Australian sherry, for at least 4 years. Those casks are always recharred though. That's the main component. And then
it was richer. The Solera had like a richer flavor, richer color, and stuff like that. I guess from the chars would it help there too.
Yeah, and then the main component to it is that we actually put it in a Solera vat like sherry systems, not in the right design of like fundamentally filtering barrels through barrels of whiskey. What we do is we have a giant vat where we put our very first batches of whiskey to our newest batches of whiskey, and everything in between in about a 5,000 liter vat, and have them mingling together. And then we bottle about 10 to 15% of that vat at a time. And whenever we pull anything out of that vat, we immediately put new whiskey inside of there.
Got it. So the other question is, it's funny that I saw, which I think might be the most important question that I've seen so far, is from our good friend Ariel Eisenberg. And you're going to love this question, Jake. The question is this: is it possible to get a private cask bottling of the Tawny?
Oh, I don't technically. All of it's private cask because we only release like 4,000 bottles at a time once a year. I think that would be like a very good question to explore.
Okay, let's explore. Okay, so we don't need to to talk about that right now. We can talk about that later offline. But I will tell you that from the reception that we've had to this Tawny right now, this is something we might want to discuss.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's actually ever brought it up because it's Tawny.
We're first.
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Definitely. It's not so much to do with like we wouldn't do it as a distillery. It's that these wines aren't being produced across Australia as much anymore. And we're always using our ethos is we're using ex-Australian vineyards casks. Even though we do some experimental stuff, we actually just released a new product called Unexpeded about 3 weeks ago, where we took Nova barrel aged for 3 years inside of X Red wine casks, and then we took a peated Scotch barrel, 4 of them. It
Or
might have
like Lefroy and Ardbeg or something.
I can't legally say what it is, but they might have a product that has Ron Swanson on the cover on the label of one of theirs.
Lockable, I love it. Okay.
But, and then we put Nova inside of Ron Swanson's barrels, 4 barrels for a year.
Nice.
And yeah, we just released that. I think it was like I don't even just a few hundred bottles of that. But it's already won like 10 international awards in less than a month. So it's done pretty well. I haven't tried it. I will definitely get it on our next tasting if I ever procure a bottle of it. But Tawny, going back to the Tawny, it's my favorite thing I've ever had at our distillery. It was something that deep caramel richness to it. It's something I fell in love with on the first sip. I had about 200 milliliters that I smuggled back in the United States when I came back from Australia, along with 28 other barrels.
You didn't say smuggle. Did you say smuggle? You didn't say smuggle.
I properly brought back in the United States, clearing all the channels. No one ever
asked
you
meant muggle. We were talking about Harry Potter. You said muggle.
Smuggled.
Muggle. You said muggle. Harry Potter. You said muggle.
I don't know who this Harry Potter is.
Right. Okay.
But I brought back 28 bottles of whiskey from Australia that time, and this being one of them. And there's only 200 milliliters, but I savored every sip of it. Shared it with one of our accounts that bought a barrel as well, the very last like ounce of it, just because he was a big fan of Starward and had been in the distillery and was purchasing his own barrel of it too. But anybody who have ever entertained with a glass of Tawny has been like, this is it.
Well, okay. So one other question about the Tawny before we move on to the last two, because we want to make sure we get to everything. The wood. So the barrels that the Tawny is aged in, is it again? What kind of oak are we talking? The French and American oak again?
Yeah. Okay. Whatever the vineyards really give us at that point, because I'm gonna guess just based on the flavor, it's a lot of American oak. I don't know if there is a certain amount of French or American oak that these vineyards are getting, where they're getting it from at the beginning stages of that. Where then we get the barrels that are after they make their Tawny port or whatever they legally call it in Australia. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. And one question that William Myers, the Nova that is aged in the Isla, in the unnamed Isla cask, what is that actually called? That expression?
Unexpeded.
Unexpeded.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. Fine. Good.
Only available in Australia.
Okay.
But I'm sure you could find it in other markets somehow.
Okay. We'll talk. All right. So now our next expression, this is one of your single cask releases. So tell us about the single cask. Also tell us what's the proof on this, and tell us, how it's aged and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So Solera was the very first whiskey we ever produced, which I always call the heart and soul of our company, because it was the beginning stages of what Starward is. But when it comes to our single cask, I always say it's the essence of our company. What we're trying to fundamentally do is make single malt whiskey that is barrel aged inside of X Red wine casks from vineyards across Australia, and breaking it down fractionally to an individual vineyard with their individual, usually Shiraz cask, sometimes a cab cask, and putting our single malt whiskey inside there for at least 3 years and then releasing it cask strength shows off, in my opinion, what Starward is and what Starward can be when it comes to being a distillery, a single malt distillery in this whole new category of world whiskey. So this was bought in 2019 by Total Wine in Texas. They bought a handful of single barrels that year. This one came off at 111 proof off the still, which we enter barrel at around 110, usually come off around an average of 112, 113 on average. So this one was kind of right in line at 111. It was aged in X Shiraz cask from a company that probably begins with a P and ends with the Olds. Probably put it together. I can't legally say which vineyards we get our single barrels from, but they bought this, and they sold through quite a bit of their bottles because they had bought, I think, 7 single barrels, and a couple of them were sight unseen. They just trusted the flavors and the components to it. They are now sold out officially of these, but I may or may not have a lot of cases of this, just if you really enjoy it and love it. But what I love about our single barrels is that they usually invite bourbon drinkers, especially our American oak single barrels, and this one's American oak. They invite a bourbon drinker in there with some traditional bourbon notes of caramel, burnt sugar, burnt brown sugar, a little bit in there. But then it kind of brings in this whole single malt variety to it. And the best thing about our single barrels is, for me, is like this orange kind of taste. Usually get to them, a zestiness, a little bit of a light chocolate, sometimes a dark chocolate in there. And
it's delicious. I got to say, it's delicious. I mean, it's really really good. And what's the actual proof of this that we're drinking right now? Because you said what it went into before the aging. So, what's the proof of 111? Yeah, yeah. But it's very drinkable at that proof. It's like it doesn't need the water. It is. No, this is really really nice. So is there a cask number on this in particular?
There is. I will have to look it up and let you guys know after. For some reason, it's not on the label.
Okay.
But the one I have in front of me, actually, you know what? I have another one. Nope, that's the wrong one. But I'll figure it out.
No worries. No worries at all.
Okay. Yeah, but if you enjoy it, let me know.
No, this is good. And no, this is. I mean, it reminds me a little bit more of the Solera. Actually, is what this reminds me of.
Yeah, definitely. It has kind of like a dessert quality to them usually. But all our single barrels are so radically different. Especially if you're tasting a French oak to an American oak and a recharred American oak or a recharred French oak. This was just an American oak, not recharred, that was settled inside of an extra Roz cask for about 3 years, 4 months, if I remember correctly on this one. So yeah, kind of getting that 3.5 year mark, kind of the traditional mark that we have is just a little over 3 years when it comes to maturing our whiskey.
Okay. Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, and by the way, I do have a question, since most of us here are familiar more with Binny's than Total Wine. What was the process with Total Wine for selecting this cask? Is it just the same thing where you send them a whole bunch of different samples and then they decide which one they like? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, this is pretty early stages. It was some of our very first single barrels we had available to us in the U.S. Our sales rep down in Texas, he did it all himself. He fortunately is neighbors and golf buddies with one of the district managers of Total Wine down in Texas. So
nice.
We have a good relationship there. I would put it that way. But yeah, it is always similar with accounts where I traditionally like to go in with at least 4 different, if not 5 different, 6 different barrels to taste from, a variety of Shiraz casks that are aged in American oak barrels or French oak barrels, and if they're recharred or not recharred. I know you kind of missed the Delilah's tasting, Gil, but there's some people that were on there where we were tasting so many different kinds of barrels, and as it goes back to with Nova.
But remember, I actually had those samples. I just wasn't on at the same time. It's like I did taste them all, but I just didn't get the whole commentary.
Yeah, and I was so scared when you sent me a note on Friday night before the tasting, and the barrel you liked the most had sold 2 days prior in California. So I was, excuse my language, shitting my pants because I'm like, oh no, Gil's taste buds are like that. I know I really like that one. I know some other people in the tasting have similar notes to Gil. So this could be interesting.
When it's good, it's good.
Yeah.
And that was one. That was a damn good cast. But they were all. I mean, let's face it. It was a great lineup. They were all delicious. I mean, we enjoyed them all.
I'm not sure in California where it was sold. It was to an account that bought 4 single barrels at a time. So
okay, well, good for them.
Good
for them. So let's talk about the mixed drinks. So these mixed drinks bottles are not available in the U.S. Is that correct?
No, but one of them will be at the end of this year.
Oh, very nice.
Not sure which one. I was told that one of them will be. So it's kind of yeah. So we're tasting.
So we have 2 different mixed drinks here. Some of us have an old fashioned, and some of us have a Manhattan. So can you first tell us? So tell us what's in. Tell us the recipe, that as much as you can tell us about the Manhattan first.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of these we sell them all the time at our bar. It was kind of one of those things where we make whiskey inside of X red wine barrels. And if we can't make a really great Manhattan, our owner always says, then what the hell are we doing as a distillery? We barrel age our whiskey literally inside of red wine barrels. So he thought, let's get on this train of and everything that's coming out right now with, whiskey in a can, vodka in a can, whatever it may be, but let's do it inside of a bottle. Because bourbon is one of the very Australia itself is the fifth largest importer of bourbon across the world, but it's
Can you repeat that? Say that again.
Bourbon is Australia is the fifth largest importer of bourbon across the world. The majority of that is inside of cans. Yeah. So it's basically Jim and Jack and Coke inside of a can.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was like, well, why don't we do that with our whiskey, but do it, package it great, put it inside of a bottle and do it professionally.
So what's in this Manhattan?
So the Manhattan is our wheat whiskey. That is we call it our single grain whiskey, if you will, but it's wheat whiskey, then barrel aged with about 8 different botanicals inside of there as well. The whiskey is aged for at least 2 years. And then we basically let it all mingle together with not barrel aged botanicals, but mingled with botanicals, some bitters as well inside of there, a little vermouth too. And we have our specialty bitters that we make at our distillery out of Shiraz. That's kind of the main component in there that really brings it to life as a Manhattan side.
Why is it red? We're getting a good question here. Why is it red?
Yeah, it's from basically the bitters that we use at our distillery. It's a deep red vermouth that we use to it.
Okay.
So we add quite a bit inside of there. It's no artificial coloring. It's all natural flavor. It's all natural from the ingredients that we use. It's not like we add red dye to it or anything like that.
It's delicious. But as we mentioned before, though, a number of us here have the old fashioned. Okay, so I have the Manhattan. People who have the Manhattan are making comments that this thing is amazing and delicious. But let's give some love to the people who have the old fashioned. So talk to the people who have the old fashioned, what they're having, what they're drinking.
Definitely. Yeah, these are meant to be poured over ice. I probably should have meant that at the beginning, but
you should have. You should have.
Yeah, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad host, I guess. Yeah. Bad guest. Yeah, the old fashioned also is still made out of our wheat whiskey. And then we actually we make these wattle seed bitters. Wattle seed is a local, I guess, fruit, I think it is technically, to Australia that we use inside of there. We put some other orange bitters inside of there, barrel aged it for at least 2 years. And really trying to make just a Manhattan or make an old fashioned out of it, something too crazy.
Okay. So it's wheat whiskey.
Yep.
And
a wattle seed bitters.
Okay. Anything else?
Orange bitters.
Okay.
And I'm missing one ingredient. Let me check real quick. Because this is also like the only second time I'm not even drinking it right now. I've only had it once in my life. So
yeah, and are these drinks, are both of these mixed drinks, are they actual barrel aged or not?
So the whiskey is barrel aged, but everything else is more just kind of like mingled together for a couple weeks.
Okay, all right. So the cocktails are not barrel aged, but the whiskey that goes into it is barrel aged. Okay.
The whiskey itself is barrel aged for 2 years.
And you said that the whiskey that goes into both of these is a wheat whiskey, right?
Yeah. So it's as we tasted twofold on the last tasting, that's a blend of wheat and malted barley. That wheat component is what makes up these bottled cocktails.
Right, and that's why the twofold was sweet from the wheat. It had that sweetness that comes from the wheat, and it was a little lighter. Okay,
yep,
got it. Interesting. Okay. By the way, I think it was Ariel Tesher who had a great suggestion here that if you want us to taste this on over the rocks, these old fashions, you're just gonna have the old fashioned, the Manhattan. You're just gonna have to send us more samples.
I think we could maybe have a cocktail party together in person. I don't know. Call me crazy.
All right. So this is an amazing lineup. We're going to open it up for questions. I have, but first, Eric, do you have any particular questions for Jake before we open it up to everybody else?
One question I had, which I also saw in the chat, where does the name Fortis come from?
Fortis is bold. That's what it means in Greek. So what we do with our bottles for our single malts is that we start here with Nova. For anybody who wasn't on the first tasting, Starward is Dave's our founder's romantic ideal of selling whiskey across the world. And when you're looking up in Australia to the solar system, if you had a microscope, this is what you'd see. Essentially, it's the stars above him. And his whole method of selling whiskey inside of a bottle, representing Australia with pride, was let's sell it across the world through the stars. And his romantic ideal has translated through this bottle image of the star field. And if you twist the bottle almost all the way around 360 is what you find for Fortis on the label. So it was kind of going back to the original label of Solera and Nova. If I can pull up a Solera bottle real quick, and finding those components and twisting it around, but then adding in that American oak flavor to it. So that since this single malt was only barrel aged in American oak, he thought, American whiskey, bourbon is more of a bolder flavor, and he wanted to kind of fall in line with that, but still do it his own way with Australian whiskey, but put it also at 100 proof, kind of matching and honoring what bourbon is currently doing in the market. And it was originally supposed to be sold in the U.S. or launched in the U.S. as I mentioned, but we decided to launch it in the UK or Germany, somewhere in Europe, instead of in the United States.
Cool. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so you all know about the raise hand function here. And actually, we got a lot of I've been asking a lot of the questions that people have been asking along the way, but I'm sure we have other questions. Actually, somebody just asked Paul. Paul, what are you drinking there? What was that bottle you were showing there a minute ago? What was that? What is that?
Paul,
unmute.
You're setting the bad precedent of allowing me to unmute.
It's all good, buddy. It's all good. So tell us, what was that bottle you were showing us there, Paul?
I don't necessarily think I'm the expert on this bottle.
But what is it?
It's not actually a big bottle at all.
No.
It's actually a small bottle. This is our bitters. So yeah, we have a secret recipe back in Australia making those bitters, though, which is inside of both the Red Manhattan and the Old Fashioned. I wasn't allowed to know what they were, but I gave a bottle or a little sample I had to one of my friends who is kind of how would you describe Danny, Paul?
A bon vivant.
There you go. And he has his own bitters, syrups, non-alcoholic beverage company. And he basically broke it down and recreated our bitters for us for here in the United States. So this is a Starward red wine bitters made from essentially Shiraz.
Where can that be acquired?
My basement. It's not necessarily legal. You don't sell them.
You are in Chicago, right, Jake?
Oh, Jake is 3/4 of a mile from me.
Did Fountainhead Market still have any?
They weren't supposed to be selling them. They were using them for their cocktails
never mind.
when they were a bar. If anybody would like a bottle of bitters, you know how to reach out to me. If you don't, you can reach out to me through Gil.
Or Eric, either one of us.
Yeah.
Or you just go to Delilah's and hang out long enough and Jake will show up.
Well, some nights.
That's not true.
That's not true for Paul.
Yeah.
Paul's walking away now.
Probably, but I thought you were
yeah.
Paul, do they still have that cot for you at Delilah's?
He needs it.
All right. So let's other questions here. Other people, I'm sure that I think Josh Eisenberg had a question that I don't think we got to. Josh, did you have any particular question for us? Because I know you had a few questions that you were posting on here, so I don't know if I got to all of them.
Wait, did they have that what for me back at Delilah's?
Cot. The cot. The daybed. The cot. All right. Where's Josh Eisenberg?
I'm here. I'm good.
Okay. You have any? Because you asked a number of questions. I don't know if I got to all of them.
No, I think you did. I think you got to all of them, except I didn't get to participate in the first Starward event. So I was just curious if you could just give me a little story on the story on the barley that's used in the 100% malted barley whiskeys that we tasted. 2-row, different, what's the story on the barley?
Yeah, it's a 2-row barley. definitely with that. We're trying to basically make it after if we were making a beer at the beginning of the day. All from local farmers that we still use to these days. So it's relationships we developed 15 years ago that we're using with them. We have about, we use a only thing we don't do on site is the actual malting ourselves. We do leave that to another company called Cooper Spirits for us to do that for us. Not Cooper Spirits that sells Slow and Low here in the United States. But we usually have about 40,000 or 4 tons, excuse me, of barley on hand at our distillery on the couple of silos we have outside of our distillery where our offices and bar are located. And that's where our still runs. About 6,000 of our casks are laid down. Our offices are there. Our bar is there. And then we have one other offsite facility where we house about another 6,000 to 7,000 red wine barrels.
Awesome. And then I have one follow-up question, because my brother Ariel and I had the same question, which is there, are there differences in like the residual oils from the American oak barrels versus the French oak barrels? Because both of us got a very distinct difference in the legs, and like the viscosity of the Nova versus the Fortis.
What did you find in those two? It's curious to hear.
I got it more in the Fortis, which is 100% American oak. But I'm just curious if that's a thing, or if I'm just imagining it.
No, I think it's a great question, because I actually find a really when I'm tasting our single barrels from French to American oak, the viscosity is definitely difference between them is definitely very prevalent. I find it also too in our American oak cast that there is much more of like this oiliness, richness to the character of it, where with our French oak barrels, we get much more of this like funky leathery taste to it. And then if they're charred, it's a whole different experience between both of those casks too. It's a great question. I don't know if we actually measure it back at our distillery, but I can definitely ask that question out and field it and get it back to you guys too. But from a taste standpoint, 100%. Like there's longer legs with American casks. With the charred casks, I feel like it's even expounded a little bit more in a way. But when it comes to our French oak cast, there's always this orange, funky leatherness to it, and almost like a mesquite characteristic that comes to our barrels.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great. Ariel Eisenberg, the other Eisenberg brother.
I'm actually going to ask a question that was asked in the chat, but I don't know if it was touched upon. Do you do any peated varieties, or do you have any plans to?
At the moment, we don't. The closest thing we've ever come to doing peated is the unexpeated barrel. We used the Ron Swanson barrels. We're finishing those that Nova inside of there for a year and a half, or for a year, excuse me. I don't know if we do. It's unknown to me. I'm not sure what the bogs are produced over in Australia, how we can get some peat out of there. If it's similar to Texas peat, I would assume probably a little bit out of there, but in the future, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, we talked to Westland at one point, and I thought that they were using American peat, but they were not. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I remember Ariel, because he was talking about that article where people had sort of misled people and he's been correcting people ever since that article came out, like about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a good thing to rule out coming from a different part of the world. No, that would never happen. Because at the end of the day, the representation of what Starward is an Australian whiskey, and everything that's produced inside of our bottle is coming from Australia. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Cool. Thanks.
Be interesting to figure out. Yeah, man.
Got it. All right. So Lynn asks a very interesting question here, and Lynn, I'm gonna paraphrase, but tell me if I'm right or wrong here in paraphrasing your question. So Lynn is very sensitive to certain like soapy flavors, soapy tastes, with textures, and she says that she gets it from Nova, but not from the single barrel expressions. Okay. Any idea why that would be?
Not as much.
Not as much. Okay.
Well, if I remember correctly, she had the soapy taste to it from Solera last time. Am I right?
Well,
but you still bought a bottle. Is that correct too? I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I bought it and I had to give it away.
Ugh.
It's really
I took
there
it.
are things where
Yeah,
I
Eric got it.
love
Eric
them,
took the bottle.
and yes, and then all I get is soap, and I know that most people don't have this problem, but it's like cilantro tasters. And it drives me crazy because of things that smell wonderful, and then I drink them, and it's, oh God, it's soap.
Do you get the? I don't know if you remember, but do you remember tasting that at all with twofold?
Yep.
So it makes sense to me with the wheat inside of there, and it produces
No,
this.
it's not the wheat. Actually, the total thing has the least of any. The tawny was pretty good, but there were hints. Fortis was less, and Nova just was in your face soapy.
The only thing I could think of would be the residuals from the wine barrels still inside of the
Nope.
stave.
It has to do with how things are watered to get to the desired proof. And I have friends at another distillery who say you have to be super, super, super careful about how you add the water, and definitely try very hard not to agitate it.
Yeah, but hold on, Lynn,
That
hold on
will
a second there.
prevent saponification, and I really wish Starward could do that because I like the whiskeys until I taste the soap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to add, so with Nova being, 23, 25 barrels batched together, is that we add the steam coat to it, but then when we're proofing down, it is a very long process over 4 to 6 weeks that we actually, or it can even be over 2 months sometimes, when we're adding water at different levels into the whiskey to get it down to that 82 proof. And maybe it's that effect to it, because I know essentially at the end of the day, you're proofing down your whiskey and creating barrel proof water out of that. And that could be a little bit of the process, because we're not doing that with these other whiskeys. And it's also it's not chill filter, it's cool filtered with where we're bringing it down to about 48% to run it through a filtration, or 42 degrees Fahrenheit to run it through a filtering system, where all the other whiskeys you tasted tonight, there's no filtration to it whatsoever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you. So William Myers has a question. Myers, why don't you unmute and ask your question here?
I remember which one.
You've been posting up a ton of questions. I've been trying to get to them. But you just posted a question. What about the colors of the labels or something? What's your question?
Yeah, so I've been looking online, and some of the single casks, like the one in Texas, have a large white label. Mm-hmm. But then I was looking at Binny's site, and they've got some with like a small black label, like the other Starward bottles.
Yep. We just literally changed up our single barrels from this year. Last year was white, and now it's going forward as black. Simple answer is that. Yep. So all of our single barrels that are completely white, like this one, were from last year. And then all our single barrels moving forward are this one. So all the black labels are going to be our single barrels this year and going forward, kind of keeping more in touch with what we do with Nova and Solera, especially with Nova, since the core product of our single barrels is essentially Nova.
Do you guys do any floor maltings?
We do, not at our distillery though.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right. So out of respect for everybody's time here, where we're right about an hour, are there any other questions? And it's okay if there aren't, because we've been asking a ton of questions during this, and I've been making sure to get to them. But are there any questions that people have that have not been asked yet? All right. Oh, Ariel has his hand's still up.
Yep. So, Jake, you were telling us to save some of our tawny for a particular reason. Why are we saving our tawny?
Nova.
Oh, to put a drop of Nova in it?
No, just really to see like if you can taste like so Nova's the foundation of all these whiskeys, especially the single barrel. I just
Mhm.
wanted to see if you could taste difference between see where you're beginning with Nova, getting the single barrel. Fortis is essentially a derivative of Nova as well. And that's kind of what I was going with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Josh, you had said, Josh, that you had put a drop of the Nova in there, or what had you done to the Tony that you're suggesting people try? Josh, bro,
I don't
you
know what you're
there?
talking about, dude. Sorry.
I apparently don't know either. So
All right. On that note, I'm muting both of the Eisenberg brothers. Okay. All right.
Oh,
So,
darn it.
all right.
Hey,
Yeah. All right.
a quick question. The Fortis, you said is Australia only?
So all of them Australian only. All the whiskeys are everything that comes in that bottle is produced from Australia.
No, I mean purchasing the bottle, you can only get it in Australia.
Oh, yeah. It's actually sold in the UK, in Germany, and a lot of Western Europe,
Okay.
but not in the US. Hopefully we'll bring. So we are going to bring one of the bog cocktails to the US either the end of this year, beginning of next year, and then we're between. I know Paul and Gil have both had the ginger beer cask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Between that, Tawny, and Fortis, one of those is going to come to the US as well.
Okay.
Any
Okay.
any preference, Gil?
Dude, it's all good. it's all good. My preference of everything that I've had from Starward completely is absolutely the Tawny. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just insanely good. And actually, that leads me to our ritualistic conclusion. Typically goes as follows. If everybody is so inclined, please pour yourself another dram. I, of course, went back to the Tawny. I'm sure a bunch of other people are doing that too. Everybody, if you could please unmute. Everybody, please unmute and please join me in saying thank you very much and cheers to our good friend Jake Huckey.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
This
Drink
was wonderful.
forever.
Jake, any final words for us before we turn off the recording here?
Beautiful
Uh,
stuff.
The
Sounds
pleasure was all
great.
mine. I can't wait to enjoy our your single cast together as well. I appreciate that. The support inside of all the little boxes across this larger box of Zoom has been immense for helping us grow the brand over the last year. It's really cool to see how we've developed these relationships online. Got to hang out finally one time together in person about a month or so ago on our beg night at Delilah's. But
Yep.
look forward to many more nights together, hanging out in person. I know Dave is our founder is coming to town to do some barrel launches, and I think we should get a little in-person get together scheduled for that too.
Let us know when it'll be, and we will be there. So that's great. So everybody, thank you again very much, Eric.